Welcome to the Qualitalks Podcast, a show about pharma and GMP. The pharmaceutical industry is a fascinating and complex field, and it takes countless people to bring a product to the market. In this podcast, we bring you some of the industry's brightest minds who will share their wisdom with you. And now, please welcome your host, Jan Kugel.
Welcome to today's episode of our podcast, where we have the pleasure of hosting a distinguished guest renowned for his expertise in good distribution practices within the pharmaceutical industry. Our guest, Paul Sarrazin, brings a wealth of experience from his latest projects, focusing on addressing the critical challenges that companies face in ensuring GDP compliance. With a keen insight into the current issues impacting the pharmaceutical supply chain, Paul will shed light on innovative strategies and best practices for maintaining quality standards and regulatory compliance. So join us as we delve into a discussion to explore the evolving landscape of GDP and the key insights that he has gained from his recent projects in the industry. So Paul, welcome. Good to have you here.
Thank you so much, Jan. Always a pleasure to be here with Qualistory as well.
Thank
And
you very
it's
much.
always very nice. Always very
Good to hear
nice.
that. Good to hear that. So this is not the first time we are talking. We had a pleasure working on a very interesting webinar, which was also concerning GDP and cooling technologies, and it was a great success, and everybody enjoyed everything you have spoken about. So how did you come to this area of expertise and area of work? So what pushed you to become a consultant, especially in this niche?
Well, actually, when I started my career, I actually started as a consultant, in I started, well, I'm French, and I started working from Belgium, well, in Belgium, in my first position, where I was offered a position as a consultant, and actually I arrived in GDPs because of two things. The first thing was a bit of an accident because I was not ready coming out of bioengineering school. I was not ready to work in cold chain and in trucks and everything. So that was kind of a happy accident where I was actually hired because I knew how to speak English. That was one of the first things that really taught me a lot to uh, yeah, to work on everything and gain some knowledge quickly. That was a big thing in GSK back in the day, around 15 years ago or something. And the second thing that brought me to it is actually my history, because thinking about everything. So I lived around 8 years in South Africa and Nigeria, and so the distribution actually of medicines back in the day was not as good as it is now. There are still some issues with regards to diversion of products and some counterfeiting. And that's what really brought me to start working in GDPs. And so when I was offered a first position as a consultant, I started working in maintenance. And I did a bit of distribution and qualification of, qualification related to shipping qualification. That started a bit like that because I knew how to speak English. And then things just moved forward, and I was very happy and lucky to work in GDP within GSK, within UCB, within Takeda. I helped the Euro airport in Basel. Um, in my previous works as a permanent employee as well in Catalent and in Synexia, I was also helping with regards to distribution topics and things like that, in addition to my job. And yeah, though that's how it happened in terms of GDPs. For my work as a consultant, actually, so I did 6 years as a consultant after I did 7 years in Catalent and Synexia as a permanent employee, and that led me to wanting to bring more value to my environment through consulting. And that's why now I've created my own company called PCare Solutions. I am doing a lot of things, mostly related to training. So I do a lot of training. I have some partners for training companies that I partner with. I also do audits, GMP and GDP audits of suppliers, manufacturing companies, API manufacturers, API distributors, the whole thing. being GMPs and GDPs in the scope, and I also do some consulting, mainly right now with regards to cold chain and distribution of pharmaceutical. And that's it for me. That's how I
Right,
arrived here.
right. In this nice hut where you're sitting right now.
Yeah, yeah. Very nice hut. Very comfortable, super nice. It's not as technological as your office, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So to those who are just don't are not watching the video, he has a very nice background with a nice hut there, very cozy, probably in comparison to the very modern office where he right now sits at his clients. And so tell me, Paul. So comparing your life as a full-time employee to a consultant, can you shed light from your perspective on the benefits of being a consultant in regard to being an employee? What are the pluses, minuses for each side?
I think there are plus and minuses in both cases. The thing is that I feel a bit more free with regards to what I'm doing right now as a consultant because I'm working for I have a main project currently with one of my customers, but I also have the luxury of being able to conducting audits, trainings, and other quick missions with some other customers who are um, who are trusting me and my decisions. So that's a very nice thing. The variability of what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. The other thing that I really like about being a consultant is also that when you reach a certain level of seniority, you also get the how would I say this, the trust from your colleagues when you go to consulting, when you go to your companies, you really earn their trust directly. But the counterpoint of that is that they have high expectations with regards to what you're doing because you're representing a high cost as well. So that's the points for consulting. The thing that I miss the most with regards to permanent positions is management. Because right now I'm a self-employed consultant, so and I am not doing any kind of management activities at this stage. Doing a lot of expertise things, but not management.
Right. So, are you considering growing your consultancy in a way that you could have assistants in bigger projects that work with you and assist you in such project? Is it something that is viable and happens?
I think it could happen in the future, but it's not really what I'm looking for right now. What I'm looking for right now is to have a solid base of customers who trust me and to make sure that I can bring the added value that I want. And I'm not sure that hiring less senior consultants at this stage would work with the trademark that I'm selling right now,
Mm,
you know.
right. And you mentioned you gain quite quickly the trust of the client. And does it happen that there are some challenges with other employees that feel that you're stepping on their toes because, let's say, other QA employees that you come and try to correct their way of doing it? So, do you encounter such challenges?
Yeah, sometimes it happens, especially now because right now I'm part of business right now, you know. Even if I have a lot of QA experience right now, I'm part of the business side of things within supply chain. But yeah, it happens. It happens. But it happened at the very beginning of my current project, but actually discussing with QA and showing them that, well, I'm lucky in the project that I'm in that all the things that they're basing their expertise on are actually things that I created back in the day, 7 or 10 years ago. So I have the history, I have a lot of insight with regards to other practices in other companies, which helps them a lot. And so they understand that I'm not overstepping. I'm just trying to give some insight on what happens in other companies and how we could make things better on our side, both in terms of business and QA. And that works. Up until now, it works. So I'm very happy for that.
Right. So that's very good to hear that at the end you quickly can find the common ground there, right? And so you mentioned you have been working in quite a lot of companies in the consultancy role. So what would you say right now are the most significant challenges that companies face in terms of regulatory expectations and the implementation of different regulations that they need to do at the moment?
Well, right now, of course, in Europe, Annex 1 is definitely a major challenge that we're seeing everywhere. I've worked a lot on it when I was in Synexi, not that much now. The points that I see since I'm working in the last 6 months, mostly in GDPs and distribution, I see a few challenges that are coming or that have been there, but that companies are facing more, let's say, more challenges.
Mhm.
They're facing more challenges, sorry, with regards to um, the expectations of the authorities in the management of marketing authorizations. Right now, I'm doing a lot of work with regards to streamlining the process for the wording used for the let's say transport related parts of the submissions related to transport conditions and definition of transport conditions, the wording with regards to the cool boxes that we're using to transport everything, the making authorities understand the critical role of shipping lane risk assessments and how you manage your shipping lanes, because there's some kind of an understanding in a lot of companies that you basically qualify your box to maintain temperature, and then the work is done. Where it's more complex, and I'm very lucky to work at a customer who has understood all of the implications of logistics in pharmaceuticals, but they're still facing some challenges by the authorities. So that's the first point. It's related to the submissions themselves. So the second point I'm facing in terms of challenges right now in GDPs is related to the understanding that um, since everyone everyone is basically coming from manufacturing, and so even if good distribution practices are around 10 years old or a bit more than that, 2013 in Europe, well, people tend to use the same vocabulary and have the same, let's say, reflexes that they have with regard to manufacturing. And so making people understand that not everything can be validated in terms of processes, especially for distribution and transportation, where you have a lot of different challenges due to the environment, is a bit difficult right now. But people tend to listen and understand in the end that we have some controls, and that even if you have a remaining risk, you still can have mitigations to make sure that you are covering that risk in the best of ways. Yeah, so that's that second point.
Right. So you at the beginning in the first part you also mentioned a new regulation that came out, right? So what is it? What was it again?
It's not really a new regulation. It's more that health authorities like the FDA tend to have more knowledge now of distribution and transportation, and so they challenge us more when we write our marketing authorization and we submit them. And so a lot of companies are facing issues. Maybe sometimes they basically shared a bit too much, or sometimes they share too less, and sometimes it's in between. Like I faced an authorization that I reviewed not so long ago where they were discussing a lot about the mechanical issues related to transportation, everything that can happen with regards to vibration shocks and everything that can have impact on your container closure, but they were not giving a lot of information with regards to cold chain management, which led to questions, which is normal. And so I'm part of the people who are accompanying the regulatory guys to have a more streamlined process with regards to these submission tasks.
So usually the companies bring you in when they face issues with the regulators for new drugs that they want to export or move, or sometimes you are also brought for new drugs that are coming out for the market and they want you already to help from the beginning with the supply chain?
Well, right now, the start of my assignment right now was related to the fact that they've had strategies in place that are still okay, but they're implementing new biological products, which brings new risks to the table, and they want to make sure that they identify these risks and that they have the correct level of mitigations in place to make sure that they're spending the right amount of money, energy, and everything to reach that specific level of compliance and making sure that the patient is not at risk. So that's the first point that made me start this assignment. And now discussing with regards to the submissions, that's where they took the opportunity since I was here to take some insight, let's say, and profit from my experience with regards to these topics.
Right. So you mentioned that sometimes companies share too much information. So can you give an example for such an occasion?
Um, I had an occasion where that was a few years ago, where they actually so I talked about the cool boxes that we use for transportation and everything, and so at that time they said that they were specifically for a market I don't remember. It was South America, I think Panama, or Latin America or Central America. I think it was Panama, but I'm not sure. But they were saying that they were always sending product through this box, which was a huge commitment. And so in the end, they had to do a variation because, of course, the box manufacturer stopped manufacturing the box, and so they had to pay significant amount of money to a significant amount of money to have that variation approved, and a lot of effort to explain the whole strategy they had again. So that was one of the things that I saw with regards to too much information and, let's say, committing a bit too much.
Right. So it means that you shouldn't, if you don't have to, you shouldn't commit to specific types of equipment or types, because you should leave
Exactly.
room. You should have some specification of what is required, but you shouldn't mention that a specific type or a model because you would like to interchange them, right?
Yeah, and you can explain a part of your strategy, but it doesn't mean that you have to overcommit within the marketing authorization because your procedures are going to change, your people are going to change, the regulations are going to change. So there are things that will definitely change and that you will improve in your strategies. So it's all a matter of finding the right granularity of information that you want to provide to say, okay, we know the risks, we've identified them, we have mitigated them through a strategy that we have in place, and that's it. You can give examples of what you're doing, but especially if you're in a non-binding section, like the one that shipping should be into, but you need to make sure that you're addressing the right section of your CTD and with the right amount of information. That's it.
Got it. Okay, so that's a quite a good tip. And you started also talking about some additional thing that you've seen that people overshare. Another example.
Another example, here it's a bit of, yeah, it's between oversharing and a slight mistake, where a company who contacted me said that there was a miscommunication basically between the technical guys and regulatory, and so in the end they said that they were sending, let's say, a cool box that is um, maintaining the temperature of your product, or it's a drug substance around -80 with dry ice. Um, and so they said that they were using a temperature controlled truck to put that box into, where it wasn't the case. And they realized that it was a mistake afterwards. And so now they're obliged to send the box in a 1525 truck. which costs significantly more than with an uncontrolled sealed truck. And so now, yeah, they have to provide data every time they're sending their drug substance, and they want to do the variation, but since the product has been approved since, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 months max, they don't want to start doing a variation right now. So they're spending a lot of money for nothing.
Right. So it's another case of committing to one type of transport or
Exactly.
equipment. So this is one of the biggest pitfalls, as far I understand. So how do you uh, write the and submit the right information, which is not too not too little, not too much? So what is the strategy here from your point of view?
It's kind of like when you're submitting for manufacturing, you need to know what your critical parameters are, your critical quality attributes are. It's basically applying the same approach. So you need to have a shipping lane that is defined. Well, you don't need necessarily to define your shipping lane, etc. That's overcommitting, definitely. But you can say already that you explain what shipping is from where to where in general. You're sending, I don't know, from the last manufacturing site to the market, and you use qualified containers. The qualified containers are qualified using an approach maybe with laboratory testing and performance qualification that you've done. Explain a bit of the results for an example of some kind, but really write that it is an example. Um, it's saying that you have controls in general over your supply chain, that you have a process for the security of your supply chain, a process for the monitoring of your product during shipping, and that allows you to make sure that the right product reaches the right place within the right conditions. That's it.
Right. So would you say it's better to undershare and then get comments and requests than just give more information, or uh, the regulators might, look, I don't know, a bit negatively on that if you share too little? So you need to find a balance, or
Yeah, you have to
how
find the
can be?
balance. Yeah, you have
Yeah.
to find the balance. That's definitely it. Because when you undershare, I saw just talking about, just length of what you're
Mm.
sharing. Uh, I think that shipping in general can be shared between everything related to product integrity and everything related to temperature. I think everything can be shared within 4 to 5 pages maximum. What I would do is explain things if it's feasible, and if you have that in your company, have a bit of um, sometimes a drawing has much more worth than words, and sometimes just a quick process flow explaining what you're doing, or the general process for shipping. That's more than enough than writing 10 pages or 20 pages of um, of submissions. You know.
Yes. And in regards to risk management, risk analysis, you mentioned that this manufacturer needs to know the process and needs to explain the controls that they have.
Yeah.
So, the risk analysis is part of the material that you submit, or the reports of risk analysis? How does it work in this regard?
It really depends on the company. I would be keen to send the risk analysis that you have as part of supporting documentation. Once again, you're not overcommitting, but you're saying, okay, we have a risk analysis in place. We've identified the risk points. We address those risk points through mitigations. And so these mitigations allow us to ensure that our critical quality attributes, that are basically physical integrity and temperature management, are ensured. That's it. It's really about making them understand that you have understood the shipping process basically in the same way as you understand your manufacturing process, not more, not less. and that you're putting the right mitigations and strategies in face of each, well, in in balance with the risk, and that you're mitigating your risk to make sure that everything is going to be fine. That's it. That's it.
Right. So, do you feel that, at least until now, people were looking at the distribution as a lesser part of the manufacturing the drug uh, lifetime? So, we have, of course, the manufacturing so important. So many things can go wrong, but also with the distribution, we know there is counterfeit, theft.
Yeah.
Virtual excursions that can destroy it. So, do you think that right now it's people give it more attention and they bring more quality people to work with logistics to make sure that everything on top? And adding on it, do you feel that right now the logistics people who also work understand quality better? They're more trained.
Well, there's a lot of questions in there. I'd say that the first point related to the understanding of shipping definitely is better now than it was 10 years ago. Because 10 years ago, or even like, yeah, before we had the current GDPs in Europe, before the update of the USP 1079 and all of the documents related to Brazil and Australia and all of these countries in Canada, especially, um, a lot of things have been made clearer because people have started to share also their experiences. It is a very good practice to do some sharing between pharmaceutical companies. That is definitely something that helps. I think that people are understanding it better and better, especially in the CDMO, especially in the CDMO business, where in the case of a lot of CDMOs, they don't take responsibility for shipping. And so the understanding that they had for quite a few of them was that, okay, so we're not responsible for shipping, so that means that we don't have to care. Our people do not need necessarily to understand GDPs. They don't necessarily need to understand whatever, all the things related to distribution. And that is something that is definitely changing right now, where we see a bit more people being trained in distribution and transportation and so on in terms of QA, especially. Um, Also, the understanding in general of the operators, if I take people from warehouses or people from also carriers, I mean the actual drivers, they understand in a better way the implications that their job has. And it is also something I've done a training of a company not so long ago where they understand that it can have a real big impact, the training and then the understanding of what you're doing. Because I was working with a company to train them where because actually the trigger for that training was related to the fact that they had an audit. They were a carrier company, they had an audit, and basically their customer said, okay, we cannot continue working with you guys if you don't have a basic training for GDPs. And I mean, the people were knowledgeable about the products that they were shipping. They knew a lot of different things, but they didn't understand the implications of pharmaceuticals, where you need also to have the documentation to understand the risks, to have procedures for the management. I don't know if complaints of nonconformances, temperature excursions, whatever. And so definitely the knowledge is becoming better. Um, with that knowledge also comes superstitions, I would say, where people think they know where they don't necessarily know. That is also something that is coming.
So, what usually people think they know that they don't know?
There's a lot of things going on with regards to. I'm not saying it cannot happen, but when you have 70 degrees under during I don't know during the or six I'll say something more plausible like 60 degrees Celsius when you're on the tarmac of waiting for the train and you see like it's 25 degrees outside and people think that they see a temperature excursion of their data logger saying that, oh my God, the temperature reached 50 or 60 degrees, where they think, okay, that's because the pallet was put right under the reactor of the plane. That's not the case in 99% of everything. What happens in most cases is that they put their data logger in a nice plastic sheet that is under the sun, and then you have, of course, the greenhouse effect going on in there, putting and adding more and more and more temperature, where the actual temperature is not as much as what is expected and what is recorded at least. There are things like that. There are other superstitions with regards to, I don't know, the logistics pharma service, where people think that since it's branded pharma, it's temperature controlled the whole way through, where it's not. Stop believing that all planes are temperature controlled. That's definitely not the case. They're not pressurized as well. That these are things that people learn the hard way sometimes.
Okay, so for example, at this point that a supply chain doesn't have to be always cooled and pressurized. So um, do you get the request to qualify such routes, and then you explain to the clients, okay, this is not viable, this doesn't happen, and or specifically this specific drug doesn't require these higher specifications, which are difficult to implement and costly.
Yeah, it's two things. I think it's mostly a point about design. The first point is related to the design of your product, but going from the solution through primary packaging, secondary packaging, palletization, you have to understand that there are risks that are coming by your. I'll take the example of biological injectable product for the sake of being understandable. So that means that I'm gonna call this the the um, the solution. I'm gonna call it the soup because it talks to a lot of people. So your soup might be um, susceptible to be modified or changed by vibrations or shocks. Maybe because it is due to sensitivity to, I don't know, oxygen, to even if it's a biological product and you shake it a bit too much, sometimes you see that there are two phases coming out where it should be only one. That shows that you have to have knowledge on your product first. Then you need to have knowledge on your primary packaging, especially with regards to sterile products. Is the container closure integrity maintained during shipping? And how is my product or how is my primary packaging affected by transportation? So you have some depressurization testing, you can do vibrations, you can do a lot of different things with regards to that. Your secondary packaging, I don't know, you have variable data. So let's say your batch number or your expiry date that is printed or that is on one face of your secondary packaging. And then you see that during your shipping simulation or during transport, even worst case scenario, during your actual shipment of your first commercial batch, you have a complaint saying that you cannot read the expiration date because your box was there like this, and it was the part that was facing with the variable data was basically moving like that during the shipping, and it erased the data. That is also something to take account. You have to take account of it during your design phases, and then you do your shipping qualification. Usually, you do vibrations, etc. You using some standards like the ASTM standards and things like that. So, what I think is that people tend to forget that it is that shipping is just part of the risks that the product will face. And so you need to make sure that you have a certain level of confidence with regards to how your product will sustain that risk or sustain these issues that can happen. That's the first thing. The second part was, so that was product, and yeah, so the shipping lanes. That's the second part. Now I'm back. Um, the shipping part is mostly about people needing to discuss with their carriers. Carriers, I won't give names. You have the big guys in the industry. You have a lot of them. but you have some specific big guys in there. Just I don't want to give too much publicity because, you know, if you have a problem with them, I don't want to be held accountable for that. But you have to trust also the knowledge of your suppliers. If they say that, I don't know, they're shipping, I don't know, from Belgium to the US, maybe they have three preferred routes where they're going, I don't know, maybe through Frankfurt, through Zaventem in Belgium, or through Amsterdam, and then they're shipping through this and this hub that they have. They know what's going on the shop floor. So if you want to do your risk assessments and identify the areas where you have some risk, where you need to have mitigations, you need to understand and identify where those risks are. And so have your mitigations. I don't know, you don't have any kind of controlled temperatures at your hub airport between two flights, then it means that you need to have a qualified shipping system or cool box that allows you to sustain that period of time. You know, it's all about putting the right mitigations at the right point and making sure that your product is safe in the end for your patient. That's it.
Right. Right. Sounds very easy, very simple. But
No,
if it
it's not.
wasn't,
It's not.
if
It's not.
it was, then you wouldn't have a job right now, right?
I,
And you
I'd
have
be
a
out of
lot,
work.
and you have a lot,
Definitely, I'd
and
be
you
out of
have
work.
a lot. So when you come to a company, right, the
Yeah.
difficulty of being a consultant is coming to a new company, really quickly understanding their processes, and just jumping into the water there, right? So, do you have a roadmap? How do you start the journey of understanding what is the issue the client is facing in terms of GDP issues, and how you address it? So, what is your work roadmap from starting with a new client and helping them understand what's going on, and starting helping them out?
Well, as you know, and we've discussed before, I'm an auditor. I've been doing some auditing since the last 15 years, basically. I know, 11 or 12 years. Let's not exaggerate. And so I use basically the same methodology that I use during audits, in the sense that I try to identify the risks. I try to, first of all, understand why the customer needs me. That's one of the first things. Understanding why we're there. If I would compare it to an audit, it's really understanding what let's say you have a GDP audit to do, and you need to understand, I don't know, maybe it's an API distribution site. It's basically the same approach. You need to understand what they're doing, what is their purpose, and doing, it's basically going through the process, identifying if there are some weak spots within the process on an operational level, then it's basically done at the same time, but looking at procedures, how they're done, and then comparing them to what is expected from the regulators and what is expected from the text. Like, I don't know, maybe you're doing some qualification and you say that you're complying to Annex 15, and in the end you look at the whole thing and okay, it's a bit outdated now, but the V cycle is still something that is quite usable for at least doing having a quick understanding of what the qualification and validation practices are, for example, and then you can go through that. And my idea is really to do a diagnostic of the issue. So it's really about understanding what the problem is, how things happened, and this doesn't need to take a lot of time. You need to open your ears, open your mind, understanding what they have, and have a doing some critical thinking, but also understanding the customer, because if they call you, it's because they cannot solve the issue themselves. So it's a lot about communication at the beginning to understand everything and make sure that you have people on board with the project. And then it's really about going to the facts, process, procedures, risks, mitigations. That's it. Well, that's at least my way of working. I'm very emotional in general in my life, so I tend to go back to the basic things so that I understand things in the broadest way. That's it. Going back to the facts, to the shop floor, discussing with the people. A lot of people tend to think that operators don't know a lot, where they're the heart of the business. That's
Exactly.
one of the things. And you have to make them understand that you're on their side as well. That's, yeah.
Exactly. 100%. So everything you said is very crucial, very to the point, I think, and it's a very good roadmap. To start with the basics and uh, really go through each of the those details of the manufacturing to the warehouse and just understand the flow of everything. So it makes sense, right? And
It's also, I'd just like to add that as a consultant, it's also, I think, a great addition to tell your customer when they come to you and they explain their problem. If you don't know how to solve that problem and you don't think you're the right person to do that, that you can also say it. I don't know. I mean, if I were being called for a specific, I don't know, a specific training to, I don't know, aseptic practices within grade A and B, that's not my entire area of expertise, you know? It's, you need to have the right people in front of the right audience, you know? And that's where, as a freelancer and as a consultant, I think it's good to have a lot of people in your entourage, I'd say, in your network to make sure that they can contact the actual good people for that.
right. So that's very good, to involve also your colleagues and understand your strengths and have a good network and,
Yeah,
have the client in mind, knowing, okay, if you're not the right one, you get then the right one and you have this network referral. So it's
yeah.
a good win-win for everybody,
Yeah,
right?
I
So
had a
that's very
very
nice.
funny experience. Like, it was 3 months ago, where a customer told me, "Okay, we need to have a discussion." We started discussing, and the whole thing took something like 45 minutes. In the end, I was like, "Okay, but you know who would be better for that? It's that person that I know who's a freelancer. I'm not sure if she's available, but you should contact her because she's definitely the best person I know who can help you." And they were like, "Yeah, but don't you want to make money?" I was like, "Money's a thing, but if I bring you some crappy advice, it's not gonna change a thing, and my reputation is on the line as well." So,
Right, right. So it's when dealing with life-saving drugs or drugs in general, fake it till you make it. It's not the right place
nah.
to do. It's not the right place to wing it, right?
Yeah,
And
never
as you
forget your patient in the end, though.
right, and as you mentioned, it's a small world, and our niche is very small. So your reputation is crucial here. So if
Yeah.
you mess up, very quickly it will spread like fire. So a lot of
Oh
consultants
yeah.
told me that. So um, reputation is crucial, especially if you're when you're consultant is everything,
Yeah.
because you are your own business, and you don't want to get a bad Yelp review on that.
Oh yeah.
And Paul, if companies strive to enhance their GDP practices, what do you believe should be their primary focus, from the top of your head, from your experience, something that always like comes up and companies miss it?
First thing, training. Always training. The people are the heart of the industry. If you don't train them properly, don't expect to do something good in the end. That's the first thing. The second thing is really product knowledge. Gain some product knowledge and then move to the steps that will help you maintain that knowledge about your product. That's it. That's it for me, at least. I think that a lot of companies are sometimes missing that opportunity during development to understand what their product is sensitive to.
Mhm. Yep. Okay, that's good. And and if we are looking ahead into the future of the GDP landscape, do
Yeah.
you foresee some changes in either regulations or the way things are going to be done differently by companies or even technologies that arise? So is there something that you feel is interesting is going to happen?
Technology is definitely a thing. You see more and more. If I give the example of back in the day, like 15 years ago, when you were talking about a data logger, you had like L-Pro and Temtail fighting in there and saying, okay, they had 90% of the market. Now you have some innovations in these companies and also in some of their how do you call that, like their other companies building data loggers. That's one thing. Um, what I see, yeah, so GPS now. So you have GPS and some data loggers. Is it necessary? Up until now, depending on your type of drug and depending on the risk that you have, maybe if you send if you have some narcotics or some controlled drugs, maybe you want to make sure that you have the GPS on the data logger just to make sure that if anything happens, that you know where it happened. You know, but not in all cases. That's one example of technology coming. A lot of things that are going on also now is related to falsification, where I think there's going to be more and more apps to allow your customers as a pharmaceutical company, so your customers themselves, so the distributors and so on, to make sure that uh, everything went right, everything related to serialization, or everything related to all of these things. And even I think these things are going to come. They're already coming to the patients since a few years now, but I think that it might become one of the things that is um, coming more and more. Things related to distribution technology of the product. So you have more and more medical devices coming on for the dispensing of your product that are also very susceptible to be damaged by transportation. I'm talking about like you have some devices where you have like springs inside, where you have mechanical things related to auto injectors, or even like you have some devices now like the insulin for diabetics, for people who have diabetes, where you have their pump and everything, where now you have a basically a probe that is taking your measures in terms of whatever whatever um whatever data you need to make sure that you're dispensing the product automatically to your patient. I see that happening a lot now. There's definitely something that will change things. The evolution of products themselves. Yeah, so there are things here. I think that in terms of regulations, things are gonna get more and more into traceability because there are some points in the distribution network that are a bit of a black box. Um, I think we also need to make sure that when reviewing these regulations, we also take care of understanding that, okay, you have the pharmaceutical regulations, but you also have the actual law, transportation law, that is also taken into account. Like, yeah, like I don't know, your product might be controlled by, I don't know, customs. Will there be any changes in terms of technologies for customs?
Right.
I know that there's a lot of changes going on with X-rays, which are tending to disappear, being replaced by other technologies that are basically other other technologies to make sure that what you're transporting is the actual thing that you're transporting. So that means that if we have these new technologies, do they have any kind of impact on our product? There's going to be a lot of questions with regards to new technologies and their impacts, both on the product, but yeah, yeah, everything related to the product and everything. So I think regulations are going to come with regards to that. That's for
Right.
sure.
Right. So new technologies and regulations would follow to cover those as well. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's highly fascinating field. I think we can talk hours upon hours
Oh yeah.
on in that field. But I think we covered quite a lot for this nice talk with you. So thank you for taking the time to chat with me. And if people want to reach out to you for some advice, what is the best way to reach you?
LinkedIn, definitely, either through my company, so you have my LinkedIn for P-Care Solutions, or directly through my LinkedIn. I'm setting up my website. It's gonna come in the next few months, but it's still taking a bit of time. I want to make sure it's very nice and very understandable. So that's probably the best of ways, through LinkedIn. Yeah.
Nice. Great. So please check our podcast information for this episode. You will see Paul's LinkedIn there, linked in his name. So feel free to check there, or just search him on LinkedIn, whatever is comfortable for you. I am sure you will not regret having Paul giving you advice on this interesting but complicated topic. Although for coming from him, it seems very simple. So again,
It's
Paul,
like everything, huh?
exactly. You need the experience for that, right? So Paul, thank you very much for this chat.
Thank you so much, and I'm very happy to be part of the Qualistry family at a point, being able to talk in your podcasts. I really believe that Qualistry is bringing some very good added value to the market. I try to attend to all of the podcasts I can see. Whenever I see Qualistry podcasts, I'm like, okay, let's go, let's go. Sometimes I'm not able to achieve that, sadly, but I'm always amazed by the quality of what you're sharing. So I really feel it's an honor to be part of the speakers.
Thank you very
It's
much.
really something
I,
no, thank you very much.
Yeah,
It's
always happy to
much
see
appreciated.
you among our webinar attendees, and you always have great questions. Always,
Yeah,
you are
sometimes a bit
always in the
tricky, but
conversation. Yeah, but it's good. Let the speakers work for their time, right?
yeah.
Great.
Thank you
So
so much once
thank
again,
you.
Ian.
We'll chat more. We'll see you on our webinars, and hopefully we will chat more on a podcast, and maybe as well have you talking on some of our webinars when we have something on the GDP area.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Goodbye, Paul.
Have a good one. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Qualitalks podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star review. If you want to learn more about GMP, please visit us at www.qualistery.com. Stay compliant and see you at the next one.